You've likely seen the headlines and the angry posts online, stories about the government spending over $1 billion to house asylum seekers in hotels. It's a narrative that has understandably caused public outrage, painting a picture of a privileged group receiving lavish benefits on the taxpayers' dime. But is this the full story? Today, we're going to dismantle that narrative, not with opinions, but with facts from the government sources and the laws that govern our country. Hi, if you're new to my channel, I'm Bella. I'm a regulated immigration consultant. My job is to help aspiring immigrants like yourself develop a personalized strategy that makes your journey to Canada as simple and stress-free as possible. The story of the hotels is a perfect example of a fact being presented without context, and it reveals a much deeper reality about the challenges facing our immigration system. Let's start with what this spending was actually for. It was not a standard benefit or luxury handout. It was an emergency measure implemented to prevent mass homelessness at a time when provincial and municipal shelters were completely overwhelmed. This was a crisis response to a national housing crisis that affects everyone, not a story of privilege. And the numbers prove that this was not a widespread perk. As of July 2025, the number of asylum seekers in these federally funded hotels was down to just 485. And to put that in perspective, there were over 173,000 asylum claims made last year. We're talking about a last resort measure for less than 1% of all claimants. This issue highlights a common source of misinformation, confusing the reality for one small group with the situation for all refugees. To understand what's really happening, we first need to know who we're talking about because Canadian law is very specific about these terms. First, and this is the largest group, you have the refugee claimant, also known as asylum seeker. These are individuals who have arrived in Canada and are asking for protection. Their case has not yet been decided. They are living in a state of legal limbo. Second, there is a resettled refugee who is approved as a refugee before arriving in Canada. This group is divided into two categories: government-assisted refugees, a small group that receives limited temporary financial help from the government, and privately sponsored refugees, a much larger group that receives zero government income support. Their costs are covered entirely by Canadian volunteers like churches and community groups. Finally, you have a convention refugee, which is a former refugee claimant whose case has been reviewed and approved. Almost every myth you see online takes the support given to one tiny subgroup, the government-assisted refugees, and falsely applies it to everyone else. So, aside from emergency measures, are claimants getting rich on taxpayers' money? This is the biggest myth and the easiest to disprove with government data. The claim the refugee gets more money than Canadian pensioners is unequivocally false. Let's look at the facts. For the small group of government-assisted refugees, support lasts for up to 1 year and is tied to basic provincial social assistance rates. In Ontario, for example, a single government-assisted refugee receives about $733 a month, the exact same amount as a Canadian on Ontario Works. A Canadian on the Ontario Disability Support Program, meanwhile, receives over $1,400. Crucially, the myths ignore that a larger group of over 58,000 resettled refugees in 2023 were privately sponsored. As IRCC states, these individuals get zero government income support. Their funding comes entirely from the pockets of Canadian volunteers. As for the vast majority, the 144,000 claimants in legal limbo, they receive no special federal money. They can apply for basic social assistance under the exact same rules and at the same rates as any Canadian in need. In reality, most resettled refugees must take out a loan from Immigration Loans Program to pay for their flight to Canada. They start their new life here in Canada in debt. Hi, if you've got any value from this video so far, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It will really help push my content to more people in your situation. And feel free to leave a comment or questions down below. Another common myth is that refugees get healthcare that is better than what Canadians receive. This is also completely false. As a claimant, you're not immediately eligible for provincial health plans. Instead, you get temporary and limited coverage through the Interim Federal Health Program, or the IFHP. Here's what you need to know about the IFHP. It's temporary. It only covers you until you become eligible for a provincial plan or if your claim is rejected. It is not better. The IFHP is designed to be comparable to the supplemental benefits provinces give to their own residents on social assistance. It covers basic essential care, not comprehensive private plans. There are also barriers. Many doctors and pharmacies are not registered to bill the IFHP, which means claimants often struggle to find a provider who will accept their coverage. This is the opposite of privileged access. Finally, the idea that refugees are a burden on the system is factually incorrect. The refugee population is much younger on average than the Canadian population, and younger people use far fewer healthcare resources. Because of this, the per-person healthcare cost for a refugee is significantly lower than that for the average Canadian. The online myth paints a picture of a red carpet welcome. The reality is actually a grueling legal maze. When a person makes a refugee claim, they're not handed a check and keys to an apartment. They're handed a file number. Under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Acts, a claimant has no permanent status in Canada. They're not a citizen or a permanent resident. They are simply a person who has asked for protection and is now forced to wait. And the wait is long. According to the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, the average wait time for a hearing can be 2 years or longer. So for those 2 years, their life is put on hold. At their hearing, they must prove they face a real threat of persecution, torture, or death, forcing them to relive their most traumatic experiences in front of a decision maker. This is a life of profound and stressful uncertainty, not privilege. For many, the biggest challenge isn't the wait. It's getting a chance to make a claim at all. And this is because of the Canada-US Safe Third Country Agreement. This agreement states that if you arrive at a Canadian land border from the US, you are barred from making a refugee claim here in Canada, and you must do it in the US instead. After the government expanded the agreement in March 2023 to cover the entire land border, the so-called loophole at places like Roxham Road was closed. This policy remains incredibly controversial. In June 2023, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled on its constitutionality, but sent a key part of the case back to lower courts. The court acknowledged evidence that the U.S. may not be safe for all claimants and that returning them to the U.S. could violate their fundamental human rights under our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The reality is not an open door. For many, it is closed before they can even knock. Let's recap the realities for refugees. The story about hotels was a response to a housing crisis affecting less than 1% of claimants. Financial support is minimal, tied to basic social assistance rates, and no better than what a Canadian in need would receive. The idea of gold-plated healthcare is a myth. Refugees receive temporary basic coverage that is often difficult to access, and they ultimately have lower per-person healthcare costs. The process for most refugees is a long, stressful wait in legal limbo, not a red carpet welcome. Furthermore, legal barriers like the Safe Third Country Agreement prevent many from ever making a claim in the first place. So the next time you see one of those angry memes, you'll know the truth. Don't just scroll past. Share this video, challenge the misinformation. A fair and compassionate society must be built on facts, not on fear. If you've made it this far to the video, thank you so much for your support. And if you get any value from this video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe buttons because it will really help push my content to more people in your situation. And if you feel like this video would be helpful for somebody else, by all means share it. And if you have any comments or experience you would like to share, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video.